Hi, this is Greg at Track 25. Welcome to our series on pushing the limits of Pro Tools Intro and Live Lite. Now that we have reached huge track counts, we can work on realistic ways to maximize productivity with these free apps, especially using systems that may be less powerful. Our series looks at the mixing process after the performing is over and choices have been made. Most importantly, it is time to move away from all things virtual. Let's see why. This is an image from an M1 Mac running Pro Tools Studio in the standard demo session. After freezing and bouncing and committing, we have this image with the same signals. Note the difference in CPU load. Same song, same tracks, just making decisions instead of delaying them. Back on our legacy Mac, we have this Pro Tools intro session. We have a synth track sending to an aux for reverb. The synth and the reverb are both routed to audio tracks so we can record them. With this basically empty session, the system monitor is extremely low. Let's add our plugins. One synth and one reverb. Let's get into record mode and play a 4-note chord twice and see how much we're stressing the Mac. Quite a lot, it seems. If we delete the instrument and aux tracks, we're playing the same synth and reverb, just without anything virtual. And once again, our system monitor is extremely low. The synth and reverb required more CPU than playing our 1024 tracks. The observation here is that playing audio files have a minimal load on the CPU, while virtual instruments and reverbs can heavily tax your CPU. Since we already know that we can play 1000 tracks, there are serious advantages to printing your reverbs and synths. Try committing the plugins and just playing the files. Let's take a look at Live Lite and reduce our reverb footprint with the help of a tiny audio effect. This is a basic Lite set using multiple drum rack chains as audio tracks. If we add reverbs and delays in each rack, we use more reverbs than a standard 8-track setup. Here, we're going to add 2 of the basic utility effects into each drum rack and name them reverb and delay. Then we can forward the signals to the return strips at the master level. Using global reverb and delay returns is easier on our CPU. We have relied on Patchwork several times to solve problems, but didn't fully walk through automation. Let's look at both Intro and Lite for this. Here we have an intro session with a Patchwork instance playing some vocal tracks. We can add instances of an EQ, and instances of stereo strip. If we show our controls, we see nothing available yet. Let's add the level parameter for each of our stereo strips. Then let's add the pan parameter for each of our stereo strips. Now we can add the air gain for our EQ plugins. Once these controls are in place, we can open the automation editor and add these controls. Here's the same plugin in Live Lite. We can choose Configure from the Controls area, then touch our adjustments for air gain. Now these controls are exposed to Live Lite for manual or automated adjustments. We've seen how CPU-intensive reverbs can be, so let's take a look at making the load lighter. We have an aux track with 2 instances of Patchwork. The first instance contains 4 vocal track files with stereo strips. We've brought out some controls for level and pan. The next instance contains 4 audio files of printed reverb, along with more stereo strips. We've brought out some controls for level and spread. If we look at the automation section, we can find our levels, pans, and width controls to add them. And now they can be automated. But notice there's a problem. With our Patchwork instances stacked, our vocals will play but won't make it to the fader with our reverb files in the way. Let's add a new control into the second Patchwork instance using the Controls editor. We will add a new control. Onto the new control, we will add a destination, then select Learn. While Learn is active, we can adjust the overall mix setting on Patchwork, then turn off the Learn feature. Now we have an overall wet-dry control for our background vocals. We can add the wet control to the automation as well. Now that we know how much our free workstations can do, we need to consider plugins that empower the setup without draining the piggy bank. One of our hero helper plugins in the series has been BlueCat Patchwork. We hardly scratched the surface of what Patchwork can do. I highly recommend trying their demo and digging deeper. It's one of the first things we install on our systems. BlueCat has a collection of nice tools, but they also offer a free pack with several plugins that you're sure to find useful. We briefly mentioned MainStage in Part 1 as an assistant to getting more recording inputs. I highly recommend adding this app to your toolbox for other reasons too. It's a great way to develop instrument sounds and has an enormous 72+ gigabyte library that includes nearly everything included with Logic Pro. In Part 4, we used BX Solo from Plugin Alliance. BX Solo is part of their free pack. They also have a great selection of high-quality plugins and probably the most user-friendly approach to license management anywhere. Prices are also good if you patiently watch for the sales. We use PA plugins regularly. It's worth mentioning Universal Audio. Historically, they have been at the forefront of providing DSP solutions to take the load off your Mac. There are always a few plugins that need to remain active in the final mix, like bus and master EQ and compression, and especially reverb. Running these in hardware can make a big difference. In this series, we empowered Pro Tools Intro and Live Lite primarily because they were restricted products. If you like the linear mixing style and don't like restrictions, there are 2 workstation apps you may want to have a look at. Harrison Mixbus offers a console-style workflow that includes high-quality built-in channel processing and has no track count limitations. It's affordably priced, well-supported, and you can try it out before you buy. Traction Waveform lets you build your mixer, similar to Pro Tools Intro and Live Lite, and also has no track count limitations. Waveform easily passes this 1024 track test just by importing the audio and pushing play. There's a free and pro versions. Both are worth a look. To wrap things up, let's look again at a chart from Part 1 where we looked at externally mixing 7 systems from all our free licenses. With these new track count tricks, we can update the channels to more than 7,000. That brings us to the end of Part 6 and the end of the series. We hope you enjoy adding these fun tricks to your Pro Tools Intro and Live Lite projects. This is Greg from Track 25. See you next time.